It's a huge amount of money to pump into as a knee-jerk reaction to Modi's request. Remember, £1.6 billion is a third of 1% off the lowest rate of tax in this country, income tax. That could go into people's pockets. We spent £3.7 billion from international aid budget last year looking after illegal migrants in this country. We spent £5 billion on the war against Russia in Ukraine. That adds up roughly to about 10 billion, if I've got my numbers right. That's 2% off the basic rate of tax. We keep getting told government finances are stretched, and yet the government has all this cash to chuck around. Now, Peter Spencer came at this debate with a whole load of presumption as if it was fact, like climate change is an established reality, that we've had freak fires which are as a result of climate change. I think one of the other topics we're going to be discussing later is a lot of those fires that have been promoted to us through the press and media as relating to climate change were actually triggered by poor forest management and by people deliberately starting fires. And we all knew that, because anyone who'd looked at the weather report and roads when those wretched fires were taking place would have noticed the temperature there was only 30 degrees centigrade. It wasn't up at the 45 degrees you would have needed for it. No, this is Rishi Sunak chucking money, our money, at his pet project, trying to keep Modi sweet. And while I'm on that, Modi needs to be called out. Modi is breaching our sanctions, taking advantage of our sanctions against Russia to do cosy deals for India to enrich himself. We've already given India £2 billion in aid over the last few years. And as Peter said, it's the fifth largest economy in the world. This is Rishi Sunak sidling up to Modi in a way which he shouldn't be doing as British Prime Minister. And I have to say this too, Martin. You've got to bring Rishi Sunak's motives into question. His wife declared herself to be a non-dom. And part of being a non-dom is having to state where you wish to eventually settle. And she put India down on her non-dom status. This guy has a lot of connections with India, including a wife that eventually wants to go back to India.
OK, Aaron Bastani.
Well, a few points of disagreement perhaps with Ben. So I think climate change is a huge issue. I think, fortunately, Britain is going to be immune from many of its worst effects. I think at some point in this century we're going to see massive problems with regards to crop yields, with regards to access to drinking water in places like South Asia and whatnot. Park that for a moment. So I think it's a huge issue. I would also say, with regards to this, it is a huge amount of money. I don't really think we should be paying it. I certainly don't think we should be paying aid to India when it's got its own space programme. Very cost efficient, by the way. I think they sent somebody, they sent a vehicle to the moon for less than I think Chelsea paid for Kai Havertz, which tells you that's how you do public spending.
Send them to the moon.
So that's really good public spending, really efficient public spending. Wishing we learned something from them. So I agree with all of that. But what I would say is, particularly with regards to the Green Climate Fund, is that this is a public-private initiative. So the point here is that taxpayer funds from around the world pay into this fund, which allows the private sector to come in. So you're basically leveraging public funds to attract crowding in from private investors, private capital. So I think there's a bit more to it than that. I think the default...
But then that allows them to greenwash their corporate credentials and
exactly.
tax break anyhow.
Exactly. It's very similar to ESG. So I think the sort of default is this is a leftist agenda. Why are the Conservatives doing it? But like ESG, actually, this is about a fundamental shift in what capitalism looks like in the 21st century. And, I mean, I think Ben's right to bring up Rishi's, let's say, commitments to places which aren't the United Kingdom. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. I'd also say his commitments to people that he used to work alongside in the City of London, people like Goldman, Deutsche Bank and whatnot. They are very much invested, literally, in the success of these kinds of projects because it consists in the taxpayer, Joe Bloggs, basically making sure they make money and certainly don't lose it.
Ben Habib, on a slightly different point, if the public were allowed to vote on all of this, if they were actually given a choice of net zero by 2050 or not, how do you think that will go?
I think they overwhelmingly vote against it. We all know that net zero, as being, at least in the way it's being delivered by this government, is hugely inflationary. It's all hitting us in our pockets, all the way from fuel taxes to having to insulate our homes in order to comply with regulations that come in 2027. And by the way, if we sell our homes without the requisite certificates in 2027, we also now know there's a potential to go to jail, which I'm sure you've read, in the new Energy Act. And no, Lord Mervyn King said yesterday that the most inflationary policy adopted by the Conservative government was this drive to net zero. And I hasten to add, the method by which we are getting to net zero, there are better ways of doing it, like championing nuclear fuel, like making sure the North Sea produces fossil fuels for our needs until renewable energy can catch up.
Yeah.
But actually what we've done is economically emasculate ourselves in the pursuit of this ideology before we've got the technology to seamlessly give effect to it.
Okay,
and
Ben.
that's the problem.